Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. 2 weeks into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there is a lot of talk already about prosecuting President Putin and his regime and his cronies for war crimes. And what we see on the ground in terms of the shelling of residential areas, the killing of civilians, and so far as many as 50 children, driving over 2 million Ukrainians out of their homes, many of whom have had to cross borders for perhaps months or years. And the mere fact that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was so unprovoked and unjustified would seem at least to give substantial material to governments and war crimes prosecutors to pursue the Putin regime for many years after the conflict has ended. Now, predictably, when we talk about political leaders and war crimes, there's always a degree of skepticism. And particularly when we think of Russia. After all, President Putin has absolute power with his security apparatus. He's clamping down on any sign of repression. Even people who put "Stop the War" stickers in their windows are likely to be arrested and face imprisonment. So it doesn't seem likely that he's going to be out of power anytime soon, and that a democratic Russian government is going to extradite him and his generals to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But we've been there before. I well remember as a NATO official back in the 1990s when in 1994 the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia was established. And then also there was a sense that this was window dressing to salve the bad conscience of the international community for not stopping the repression of human rights in places like Bosnia and Kosovo. But the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia proved the skeptics wrong. Over the next couple of decades, it indicted 161 Bosnians, Serbs, Croats, even Kosovars for war crimes. All but 5 of those eventually did face justice in The Hague. Heads of state like Milosevic of Serbia actually died in prison in The Hague, pending the outcome of his trial. We had the first successful prosecutions in history for rape as a war crime and, of course, for genocide on 2 occasions, including the Bosnian Serb commander Ratko Mladic and also the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Radan Karadzic, who are now serving lengthy prison sentences. So it did show that when there is a will, there is a way. Now, after the International Yugoslav Tribunal wound up, we had a successor in terms of the International Criminal Court, which is a permanent court of the United Nations, also in The Hague, which was established by the Rome Statute in 2002. Now, its record, frankly, has been rather mixed. It has had more failures in terms of attempts to indict war criminals than it has had successes. A couple of the indictments actually have led to acquittals, as in the case of Laurent Gbagbo, the former president of the Ivory Coast, or Uhuru Kenyatta, the current president of Kenya. But it has also played a key role in isolating dictators like Omar el-Bashir of Sudan, who was forced to leave power in 2019, or making life difficult for notorious war criminals like Joseph Kony, the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army. So we should certainly not give up on the ICC yet. And indeed, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is now very much back in vogue because 39 countries have asked the chief prosecutor, the new chief prosecutor, Karim Khan of the United Kingdom, to open a file, an investigation into Putin and his regime for the activities that we're already seeing in Ukraine. He has agreed to do so. Now, Russia predictably has greeted all of this with a degree of scorn. On this Monday, Ukraine took Russia to court, not in the ICC, but in the neighboring court, the International Court of Justice, which adjudicates disputes between states, to condemn Russia for its invasion. The Russians didn't even bother to show up in the chamber. But that is not a reason to give up, because there are a number of useful things that war crimes prosecutions, war crimes investigations can do to rein in the Russian activities, even before indictments are officially issued and Russian generals or politicians begin to show up in the Hague. The first thing, of course, is that the threat of indictments can act as a powerful deterrent, particularly if Russian generals are considering to carry out any atrocities or wide-scale massacres, as we've seen on the African continent or in the former Yugoslavia. I well remember from, again, my experience in NATO back in the early part of this century, going to North Macedonia, where a civil war was on the point of breaking out, and talking to various commanders, realizing fully well that they were hesitating to use force, having seen their old colleagues in the Yugoslav National Army elsewhere in the former Yugoslavia actually be indicted in The Hague. So the mere sword of Damocles of prosecutions can, of course, make people hesitate. They can't be certain that they will die safely in their beds at home. The second reason why we should carry on, of course, is that the Putin regime is not going to last forever. When the Milosevic regime fell in Yugoslavia, then we saw a number of war prosecutions go ahead. And so we should obviously plan for the longer term here. The third reason is that war crimes indictments obviously make it very difficult for Putin and his acolytes to be treated as respectable people in the international community. They won't travel abroad because there's always a risk that an Interpol red notice will be issued as soon as they arrive in London or Paris and could be arrested. They will be persona non grata. They will find it difficult to launder their money or to raise loans. This will further isolate the Russian regime. Another reason is because victims need a sense of justice, need a sense of closure. After wars, if you want Serbs and Croats or Kosovars and Serbs to reconcile and talk to each other again, a frank accounting of the past, a recognition of crimes, a recognition of responsibility is very important. And when this doesn't happen, as you've seen in regard to Turkey and the Armenian massacres of 1915, when there is no historical commission or in terms of France's relations with the Algeria, which separated from France in 1962, these old ancestral disputes tend to carry on. And finally, war crimes proceedings, by opening up the forensic evidence, by compelling the testimony of witnesses, gathering the evidence, help to set the record straight and to counter the inevitable rewriting of history or myth making that we always see. So what do we need to do to make the threat of war crimes real? Well, first of all, countries themselves need to support the ICC, and they need to open their own national investigations, as Germany decided to do yesterday. Germany has a legal doctrine of universal jurisdiction, which means that its courts can try people for crimes committed elsewhere. Last January, Germany caused a sensation when a federal prosecutor in Berlin successfully brought to trial a Syrian secret police officer for a mistreatment of detainees in Syrian prisons. So let's get nations involved. Secondly, the UN has set up a special war crimes tribunal uniquely for Ukraine, as we had in the case of Yugoslavia, and also in the case of the genocide in Rwanda, with a special UN court which was established in Arusha in Tanzania. We can get the judges ready, we can get the teams ready. This will certainly make it look real. Of course, Russia will try to veto this in the Security Council, so perhaps the UN General Assembly, which overwhelmingly condemned Russia this past week, could be used to authorize the establishment of a special UN tribunal in the way that the UN General Assembly authorized the UN intervention in Korea in 1950, at a time when Russia, again, or the Soviet Union, was blocking the Security Council. We need to make it clear that if Russia is convicted for war crimes, or Russian leaders, then Russia will be liable to pay reparations for the rebuilding of Ukraine, which will obviously run into billions, given the extensive damage of infrastructure, nuclear power stations, grids, railway systems, buildings that we are seeing at the hands of Russia at the moment. And we need to keep the focus on the war crimes aspect in speeches and in our policies, so that the Russian regime knows that this is not simply going to go away, and certainly not offer Putin any kind of amnesty from war crimes prosecutions if he decides to take the off-ramp and take his forces out of Ukraine. So this is a long-term enterprise, but justice, like death and taxes, is inevitable in the end. We should believe in it. Lawfare is perhaps the best antidote that we have at the moment to Russian warfare. And when the war criminals of Russia do eventually appear in The Hague or elsewhere, never will the cause of justice have been more finely served. Thank you for watching and listening today, and I look forward to engaging with you this time next week.